This is a tough concept to explain, and hopefully I'll do justice to it. And it's one that I've been thinking about for quite a while. And what we're doing in the U.S., we're competing with companies that have lower cost of production. Sometimes that lower cost of production is because of labor. Sometimes it's because of environmental conditions and regulations. And sometimes it's because they're more efficient, because they've invested in the long term, which we talked about. So when the U.S. buys meat from overseas, it has to come from a facilities that's been FDA inspected by our own inspectors to make sure it meets the quality standards that we need. What if we did the same thing for quality of product and quality of the and quality of the companies that manufacture the product? Hold them to a standard of employee benefits and employee risks and safety issues. Hold them to the same standards of environmental standards. And we had ourselves as the U.S. government or third-party inspectors, and there's a lot of them out there, that go in and do the certification. So they could look and say, okay, do these workers have a bathroom available? Do they have a break? Do they have good working conditions? Are they safe? That would be one score. Another score could be, okay, does the factory pollute? One of the problems U.S. businesses have is our factories can't pump out bad stuff. They have to scrub the water. They have to scrub the air. They have to maintain the quality of the environment. In a lot of countries, that's less of a concern because, again, they're looking short term and they're able to say, okay, go ahead and push the water out the back door and we'll worry about the problems down the road, downstream. So we could have a standard to where companies, instead of tariffing the whole country and taxing the whole country on their products, but we could have companies that meet standards. They'd get a rating, A, B, or C. And if they're A, they come in duty-free. If they're B, because they don't have the employee benefits or the employee safety issues, they come in at a higher tariff. If they don't have environmental protection and employee protection, they come in at a C. We could do that. It wouldn't cost us a lot of money. We wouldn't be taxing our consumers by tariffs. Instead, we'd be improving the quality of stuff overseas. If a company's sales in the United States all of a sudden dried up, if they couldn't ship to the United States because they didn't clean their water going out the back, or they didn't provide bathrooms for their employees, the incentive would be there for them to improve. And that's the thing. Everybody works off incentives. They look at something and say, I'm not going to do it for your good, but I'm going to do it for my good. So what is it for me? Well, if all of a sudden they can't export, their good is hindered. So they're going to say, okay, I didn't care about the downstream people before, but now that I've got a situation where I have to pay a higher tax or a higher tariff coming into a country because I don't meet those standards, I'll improve it. And then we don't have companies where we're in a situation where we're comparing apples to oranges. One of the things here in the state of Washington that just happened is we had some ferries, contracted government wanted some ferries, and there was bids. I think we took in 5 bids. It was one of the requirements. They had to have 5 bids. And a company in Florida won the bid. And a company in Washington complained because they were competitive to a point. But the state of Washington had requirements that the state of Florida didn't. They had apprentice requirements where they had to have certain workers that were being apprentice and had to be trained. They had wage requirements that weren't the same and were higher than the wage requirements in Florida. They had the environmental issues. There's a lot of other things that the state put onto the Washington contractor that the people in Florida didn't have to do. So Washington was more expensive. Florida was less expensive. Now, would the state have been better off to lower some of those standards? So instead of making the company pay high wages, they made them pay competitive wages. Those workers would actually get jobs right now. The company and the state of Washington lost $1 billion. $1 billion taxpayer dollars are going to Florida because our factories were not competitive. Shouldn't we do something to make our factories competitive? Should we tax them to the point that they're not competitive? And how are we going to attract new businesses when we're not competitive, when they're not appealing? Because our regulations, though they're good intentioned, they're not the same as everybody else. So if you're going to put out a bid, maybe the quality is one issue, but also some of the other factors. The employees, you could put into your qualifications that the employees have to have a certain standard of pay, that apprentices had to be done. So you could include that into the bid documents so that everybody's on the same playing field. You can't compare playing fields when they're not the same.